Welcome back to Talk of the Town on WHTC, Holland's Cool FM, on WHTC.com, and on the WHTC app for your smartphone. Once again, here's your host, Gary Stevens.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town for this Monday, August the 3rd. It is the first Monday of the month. And that means that we have a chance to catch up with things going on in Lansing with a member of the Lakeshore's legislative delegation. He is Republican House Representative Luke Meerman out of Coopersville. District 89 is what he represents. He's on the other end of our phone line this morning. Luke, good morning. Welcome back, sir.
Good morning, Gary. Glad to be with you.
And if you have a question for the representative, Luke will be happy to answer it at 616-395-1450. First of all, with the primary election tomorrow as we speak, does it feel a little weird that in this case you're not running and you're not being concerned about election results, say tomorrow night and all that?
Yeah, it does. It is surreal, and I would say more sort of like an end of an era type feeling. I do have butterflies in my stomach just because there's a few candidates that I'm really looking forward to hoping to win, but unsure if they're going to. So I'm still very interested in what's going to happen tomorrow, and we'll see.
What? I'm going to ask this, and I'm not certain whether or not it's an appropriate question, but I'll ask it anyway. How difficult or how easy might it be, and we'll use the Republicans because that's what you are, to have Republicans rally around those who win the primary, even though it might not be the candidate of their choice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. I liken, I'm not the first one to do this. I know a lot of people have, but, the primary vote is really kind of a decision, potentially a battle within the family. The family of the Republican Party or Democrat Party, whichever one you want to think about. And that's why I think primaries can be the hardest, almost, because almost every other day, outside of that primary decision, you're sort of on the same team. You're in the same family, mostly heading towards the same goals. But, tomorrow, Republicans, Democrats will get to decide who is their nominee for the general election in November 3, and that can get pretty heated, these primary battles. And so when they get heated, it can make it harder. People get really disappointed, people get really frustrated if their candidate doesn't win. And I think it's just a matter of keeping things in perspective, keeping the big goal in perspective. And I, for one, really appreciate thinking about history. And if you go all the way back to our founding fathers, Jefferson and Washington and others, they had their epic battles as well in the beginning of our nation. And so, just because things are hard and messy now doesn't mean it's never happened before. And so history for me is a great comforter, knowing that this isn't the first time we have had, this big of a battle.
My question then becomes, if some people believe my guy didn't win in the primary, so I'm sitting this general election out, you're basically, maybe handing the election to the other party, and it's a case of, well, do I want the person I didn't like in the primary to at least win in the general election, or which is the lesser of two evils, if that's the case?
Yes. Yeah, and I would encourage people, feeling like that after tomorrow, to think about the bigger picture. And remember that I do think there's differences between the parties, and I think if you care about which direction the nation is going to go, it's still incredibly important to get out and vote. And for instance, President Trump is a lightning rod. We all know that. We see that. But man, can he get people out to vote? People that normally sit on the couch and don't come in, they come in because Trump's on the ballot. In both sides, against and for. But, we as Republicans, he helped us last year, getting people out to vote that normally don't vote, and then, they voted for another Republican candidate as well. But now, I think kind of to your point, we as Republicans, since he's not on the ballot, it's hard to get some of our base out.
If you have a question for State House Representative Luke Meerman, he'll be happy to answer it at 616-395-1450. Let's touch upon a couple of things going on in Lansing as we well, first of all, I'll just say this. This is pretty much the downtime between the end of June and Labor Day weekend. In district is what it is official. Candidates, in the sense of those running for election or re-election, are campaigning. Others are doing the tour of the district, district hours, and the like. How do you approach this particular downtime between now and Labor Day, knowing that after November, after the end of the year, you're done as terms of us being a state representative? Do you approach it a little differently or not really?
Yeah, I see the time closing quickly for me. And when it's over, I'm not in Lansing anymore, and I'm not able to, I think, have the leverage I appreciate now. So there are some things that are pretty high on my priority list that we're trying to push through. Talking to leadership about and others, and just trying to get bills introduced and on the table. Whereas in the past, I could say, well, we worked really hard, but couldn't quite get it across the table. We'll have next year to work on it. Well, I don't have next year, so yeah, absolutely. There's things that I want to desperately get done before I leave.
Part of it is doing some reform of Child Protective Services. I know this is something very near and dear to your heart. And how has that battle gone for you?
There's not many lobbyists in that space. And that shouldn't matter, but just trying to be honest with your listeners, sometimes that paid lobbyists in Lansing, and I'm not saying this in sort of a negative way in an overall sense, but by that I mean that lobbyists are, terrible people. I think they have a job to do and they get paid to do it, and they're pretty good at it. That's sort of my point. And when you sort of don't have that horsepower there in Lansing, it does become a little bit harder. And so these children issues, they just don't have as many people that are really wanting it to happen. It's not sort of the hot, sexy topic that everyone wants to deal with, but it's more of a heart issue. I was on Children's Family Services committee my first term 8 years ago, and I called it my heart committee because it has to do with so many things that are near and dear to our families, and it's sort of not the committee that everybody clamors to be on, but it's incredibly important. So, yeah, we got our work cut out for us, but I'm very hopeful. We have some really good people behind us. In fact, right out of Ottawa County here, Court Administrator Association and a whole other group of people just kind of rethinking how can we do children's services better. So I'm looking forward to August 11. We're going to have a hearing and kind of be presenting on many of our hearing ideas of what we think children's services should look like.
What will be some of those ideas that will be presented on the 11th?
Yeah, I think what we have is centralization right now, and we have just a behemoth of a department. Not sort of speaking anything against the frontline workers, the people that try to do the right thing, but when something gets this big, it's really hard for it to be agile and nimble and sort of flexible on the ground. And what we're facing, I think, is too often top-down sort of commands that don't take into account something on the ground in that family's life, in that child's life, because these decisions that are being made as to whether or not children need to be removed from a home, what services they need, trying to keep them from being removed from the home, and all the other things in that world, the more the more of that we can put in the hands of those on the front lines, the better off we are. We want standardization. We don't want Detroit doing things completely different than Ottawa County as far as services and different things like that. But we don't want centralization, and we have that. We have centralization. So we need to decentralize much of CPS work.
Another thing that you've been trying to push forward, Luke Meerman, is an audit of Michigan's mental health systems and to see basically what they are doing right, but maybe more to the point, what they're not doing and what needs to be done to improve mental health services in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. $5.38 billion, 1.7 is sort of Michigan's money. At least it comes out of general fund. The rest of it comes from the federal government, which also comes from our pockets as taxpayers. But with $5.38 billion, I think we should be getting more for what we're paying for. And I don't think I can for sure tell you why the money isn't sort of getting to those that are really need the mental health help. What we have seen is that in testimony in our oversight committee on children's welfare, providers and many other people within the chain pointing fingers. The money's over there. They're not giving us the money to do the job we're supposed to do. You have the community mental health, which hires the providers or does the providing themselves directly of mental health help. That's generally a county-based system. And then you have PHPs, which are over multiple different counties. There's 13 of them throughout the state. And then you have DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, so you really have 4 different pots of places where the money could stop. And the purpose of an audit would be, listen, how are we doing? And how much money does the PHP need to operate? If you put $5.38 million in the top, how much money does DHHS keep? How much money does because this is the layers it goes through. It goes from DHHS to PHP to CMHs to providers. So, how much money does DHHS keep? How much does PHPs keep? How much does CMHs keep? And how much do the providers keep? How effective are we doing in getting to the money to the people that are giving help to people that need mental health? So, that's what the audit should tell us.
And hopefully it will tell us. I mean, we've had the Ottawa County's executive director for community mental health of Ottawa County, Dr. Michael Bashir, is on with us, and he's one of those that is saying, hey, we're not getting all the funds that we need to be effective in what we want and need in this county, what needs to do. Is he basically echoing what other entities are saying across the state in terms of getting that money direct to where it's needed the most.
Yeah, no, he is. He's pointing up the chain and saying, DHHS isn't giving us the money we're supposed to get for the work that they have to do by law. DHHS is saying the services aren't being provided. We are giving the money; it's being wasted, and they would say they're trying to make the money get spent more wisely. So yeah, like I said, there's fingers pointing, and we need this, third party outside element to give us a comprehensive audit.
Along those lines, then, maybe this might be a simple statement, and maybe it is not so simple. I don't know, Luke, but it just seems as if maybe we just need a complete overhaul of the system. Maybe start from scratch. All right, how should we address this instead of trying to, find a solution to the problem instead of pointing fingers as that's the problem, that's the problem. Let's work on a solution.
Yeah, and it's possible that it needs a top-to-bottom overhaul, but I think it's kind of hard to know what changes are needed until you know where the money is sort of stopping and where we could do better. And hopefully after the audit, then we can all say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And, obviously it's not going to be that simple, but we're certainly going to have more information than we have now.
And, yeah, hopefully, this can be done. And, if it has to be a complete overhaul, be done in an effective and yet efficient way. Because, as you know, and many who do follow Lansing know, in this right now, it's a case of trying to make sure we are cutting on waste, fraud, and abuse. And when you start doing an overhaul, those questions do come up. Is this the best way of cutting down on this waste, fraud, and abuse?
Yeah, and you can make things worse if you're not addressing the problem. If you don't know what the problem is and you're addressing the wrong thing, you can make it worse.
We'll see what happens. Last week, Luke, your House Oversight Committee had a session looking into connections between the Michigan Secretary of State's office and the Southern Poverty Law Center, with the understanding that maybe this is not something you're fully appraised of. What exactly was the hearing all about, and what was the committee trying to look at?
Yeah, what we had in our hands was a grand jury indictment of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the indictment was over the Southern Poverty Law Center, who, for the listeners who don't know, they are, I would call them on the left side of the political spectrum. But they would say they're, fighting racism. They're fighting, the more extreme parts of our, things that they would say bad in our nation. But what I think, I don't know, you just almost can't make it up. It just sounds like a movie. That they were indicted by a grand jury, the Southern Poverty Law Center, for funding some extremist groups, the very ones that they are fighting against, white supremacy and other things. And of course, the grand jury isn't an end-all to be-all decision, but it certainly, in my mind, looks pretty damning of why would they be outright funding, in some ways funding individuals who were part of those groups, in other ways getting them money through multiple different channels, trying to hide where the money's coming from. To me, what it looks like is they were trying to ramp things up in this nation. For instance, on the white supremacy front, people that truly believe in racism, which hurts my heart to even talk about. But there are people out there like that. Why would you fund them in order just to, I guess, help your existence be more meaningful, the Southern Poverty Law Center's existence? Why that matters to Michigan is that our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, sat on their board for almost a decade when all of this was going on. So what we're asking for as the Michigan legislature is, how much did you know? And, of course, it's still being investigated at the federal level, but I think it's important that we ask some of these questions, ask for documentations, emails from our Secretary of State, what her involvement was, how much she knew.
Even though some might say, well, we're dealing with stuff that are, 7, 8 years old. It seems like we're going way, way back on this. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I'm looking at some of the accounts.
Sure. Yeah, if she knew any of that might be going on, then, she should have resigned immediately. If she didn't know any of it was going on, then that's a completely different story. So we're just trying to get to the bottom of how much she did know.
All right. A couple of other things I do want to touch on with you, Luke, real quick. Has that dairy plant been brought back up to speed? I know that the dairy plant in Coopersville had to be shut down a little bit. There's some I think bacteria problems, something like that, going on at the dairy plant up there.
So I haven't had a direct conversation with them, but it was my understanding it was a cyber attack, and it was 4 days, and it was very sort of destructive at that point, but nothing to do with the product or bacteria or anything like that. It just, they needed to get, control of their computers that run the system.
So they're pretty much back in the, everybody's back at work up there now?
Yeah.
Okay. I was, because I remember seeing that story, and I was thinking of you because that's that's in your backyard there, and I wanted to make sure, we got everything, cleared up and straight away. The other thing, and we are very brief on time, Luke, dealing with the deep well drilling by Consumers Energy over in Port Sheldon. I know that the EPA held a hearing on that in Holland. I think it was last week, and this issue is not going to go away. No, but I guess I would have to say I'm not up to speed on that issue. I'm not sure I could comment one way or the other. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's important that we, know what's going back down in our ground and how it's happening. Okay, I just didn't. I know that we've discussed the situation involving the keeping of the Campbell plant open in the past, so that's why I wanted to bring that up with you very briefly. If you need to get a hold of State Representative Luke Meerman's office, he is District 89. The office number is 517-373-0838, 517-373-0838, or go to gophouse.org, gophouse.org, and in the scroll-down menu on the front, go to Luke Meerman, District 89. Luke, as always, thank you very much for your time chatting with us. Normally in September, we don't have a chance to chat because of the Labor Day holiday, so we will take September off. And if all goes well, we'll talk to you again on the first Monday in October. Thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. State House Representative Luke Meerman. NBC News, Michael Kastner, straight ahead, followed by WHTC News, and then more Talk of the Town on WHTC Holland's Cool FM.